Welcome back, students. Find a seat, settle in. In our past sessions, we've looked at spirits of deception and illusion. But today, today's explainer for occult archetypes 304 requires a much sturdier constitution. We are examining the 45th spirit of the Ars Goetia, Vine. And listen, we aren't dealing with some mere trickster here. We are looking at a literal force of structural collapse. Vine is a mythic archetype whose very arrival basically guarantees that the walls you've built to protect your darkest secrets are about to come violently tumbling down. To really grasp the grim mood of an institution falling to occult forces, I want you to listen closely to this passage from our core text. The first crack appeared in the tower at noon. It ran from the bell chamber to the council hall in a single black line, thin as a drawn sword. At sunset, the water below the cliffs turned rough without wind. Waves struck the harbor wall and threw up coins, bones, and pages sealed in green wax. Then came the horse, black as a drowned moon. Only when lightning opened the sky did the watchers see the lion seated upon it. By morning, every hidden room had a door. All right, here is our syllabus for today. First, we'll cover the traditional Goetic profile. Second, we're contrasting his ranks of king and earl. Third, we'll dive into towers, storms, and symbols. Fourth, we'll examine the moral cost of truth. And finally, number 5, we'll talk about writing a mythic antagonist. Let's jump right into section 1, the traditional Goetic profile. Historically, the old catalogues classify him as the 45th spirit. According to the traditional Ars Goetia, Vine, sometimes written as Vinea, commands a whopping 36 legions. His traditional domain covers discovering hidden things, spotting witches and wizards, and revealing matters of the past, present, and future. Visually, the texts catalog him as a lion riding on a black horse, carrying a viper in his hand. But for our purposes, if we really want to understand him beyond the traditional descriptions, we have to look at his distinct architectural and elemental domains. He builds towers, he overthrows great stone walls, and he makes waters rough with storms. So yes, he's an investigator, but he's an investigator who brings an entire army with him. Moving on to section 2, contrasting king and earl. So in these ancient catalogues, holding a dual rank is incredibly rare. But Vine, he's both a great king and an earl. Think about what that actually means. On one side of the ledger, you have the regal authority of a king. That implies absolute command, judgment, courage, and this elevated, almost divine right to demand hidden answers. It's the royal right to seek the truth. But then you contrast that with the much older, grounded, martial nature of an earl. An earldom is heavily tied to physical territory, fortifications, walls, towers, and brutal siege warfare. The crucial takeaway here is that Vine doesn't just sit on a distant throne passing judgment. No, he arrives right at your borders to violently dismantle your defenses. He perfectly combines royal investigation with terrifying military consequence. Section 3. Towers, Storms, and Symbols. Let's break down his imagery, starting with the viper in hand. Tradition shows Vine holding a viper almost like a living scepter. In dark fantasy storytelling, this is a brilliant illustration of poisoned knowledge. You see, Vine doesn't merely reveal the truth. He reveals it with a venomous edge. It's highly dangerous evidence. Once this truth is exposed, it literally strikes out like a snake, permanently wounding the protected political order or the noble house that tried to bury it. The truth itself becomes a weapon. Next, we have the symbolic weight of his architecture. Towers and stone walls represent vantage points, imprisonment, and above all, denial. Picture those cold, immovable stone walls built by noble houses, specifically to indefinitely hide their crimes away in archives or deep dungeons. Well, when Vine builds towers, he's creating unassailable vantage points to watch you from. And when he throws down stone walls, he completely shatters the illusion that stone can keep a secret forever. He's the spirit who rips out whatever is buried in the stonework and the political silence.
And then, the storm waters. If stone is silent and stubborn, storm waters are chaotic, wet violence. The whole symbolic importance of storms in Vine's mythology is that rough water becomes memory in motion. Think about it. A calm sea does a beautiful job of hiding a shipwreck, right? But a violent sea? That returns drowned secrets, cargo, coins, and bones right back to the shore. Vine disturbs the surface of history. He forcefully turns stillness into testimony.
Which brings us to Section 4, the moral cost of truth. Now, Vine's absolute core strength is his ability to expose hidden powers by directly attacking secrecy through structure. He takes a simple investigation and turns it into a violent siege where the architecture itself is forced to confess. He breaks fortifications and exposes those hidden powers flawlessly. But his weakness, and honestly the terrifying narrative function he serves, is that his revelations are intensely, destructively violent. Truth exposed through absolute ruin means the innocent might very well get destroyed right alongside the guilty. So, let me pose a stark Socratic question to the class. Is truth still justice if it must break a city to become visible? Because if a kingdom begs Vine to uncover a traitor, they are going to have to watch him break every single wall that ever hid a lie. The collateral damage of demanding absolute transparency is just horrific. And that, right there, is the moral conflict sitting at the very heart of the Vine archetype. To really drive this home, let's quickly contrast Vine with Shax, another spirit we've covered in these explainer lectures. Shax is the thief, right? He steals perception, makes evidence unreliable, and actively hides the truth. Vine is his exact opposite. Vine is the king who violently smashes concealment just to force evidence out into the open. Together, they represent the two extremes of occult mystery. But never forget, liberating the truth with violence isn't a healing corrective. Vine's arrival isn't a cure. It's the ultimate catalyst for a kingdom's total collapse. Finally, Section 5, Writing a Mythic Antagonist. As a narrative archetype, Vine is the ultimate conflict engine for dark fantasy stories. Psychologically, he embodies that deep-seated fear that every defense a person builds will eventually become evidence against them. For your characters, this creates such a brilliant tension. You force them to choose. Do they uncover the hidden truth, or do they try to survive the total structural collapse that comes with it? This archetype works so incredibly well in political horror, sea legends, and occult mysteries centered around corrupt noble houses. Here we've got 5 distinct plot hooks you can use to put this into practice. You could write the Storm Archive, a library built inside a sea tower that can only be read during violent storms. Or the Drowned Foundation, where rough waters slowly climb a stairwell from a buried harbor. Whether it's the Viper Witness, the Witch Behind the Wall, or the Lion at the Black Gate, these hooks take obscure historical descriptions and forge them into immediate physical threats for your protagonists. Aesthetically, if you're writing Vine or a villain inspired by him, your visual motifs have to be striking. You want to paint a vivid picture using a palette of obsidian black, storm blue, iron gray, venom green, and royal gold that's been heavily dulled by rain. Use powerful imagery, black horses standing perfectly still in a downpour, massive stone walls suddenly split by lightning, or seawater unnaturally climbing its way inland. He shouldn't feel like some wild berserker.
He needs to feel like a king arriving at the very end of an investigation, where every wall he touches has already been judged and found wanting.
All right, as we wrap up today's arcane lecture, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought. Ask yourselves, as the creators and architects of your own dark fantasy worlds, what secrets have you buried in your world's towers? And what will actually remain when the storm finally breaks the stone? Class is dismissed. Go carefully and maybe, just maybe, double check the foundations of your own homes tonight.